A reading from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things come into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it.
The Gospel of Christ.
Thanks be to
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
So good morning again, everyone. So here we are at the beginning of a new year. Let's toss out the old year and begin again. I've had an image in my mind of a potter trying to make a beautiful bowl, but the bowl's not coming out right. So the potter throws out that clump of clay and calls that disposed clump of clay 2020. Then tries again with another clump of clay, only to have the same problem. So throws out that clump of clay and calls it 2021. So now for the new year, beginning to make that bowl for a third time with another clump of clay. But on further reflection, I think this is a really unhelpful image because it doesn't acknowledge the good things that happened in our lives within the past year, past couple of years, despite COVID. So as we begin a new year, and again, with these major restrictions, I'm committed to recognizing the good in our lives, even with the bad of COVID continuing on. So in that context, our gospel reading today, John chapter 1, is so appropriate to the beginning of a new year because it's about much more than the beginning of a new year. It's about the beginning of everything, including the beginning of time itself. So John starts his gospel by composing for his readers a profound portrait and context for all existence. He's painting the big picture at its biggest, if you will. And I think it's a pretty interesting way to start both a gospel and a new year. So let me read the opening verses that John writes. In the beginning, and that's the beginning of everything, of all creation, of the universe and time itself. In the beginning was the Logos. The Logos was with God, and the Logos was and is God. And all things came into being through the Logos. And without the Logos, not one thing came into being. Wow, that sounds big, which it is. But what is this Logos that's so important to John that he starts his whole gospel with this focus on Logos? What is this? Well, here John is taking an old and well-known term from Greek thought. But because it's such an old term in Greek thought, it's accumulated a wide variety of meanings over time. So for Greeks, this word Logos carries a sense of universal force or quality throughout all existence, built into the fabric of the universe. But the type of force or quality can differ. For some, it's the speech or the word spoken through the sages. For others, it was wisdom. For others, it was rationality. For others, it was kind of like this common law through all of nature, the force that keeps nature together so the world doesn't fly apart. For others, Logos is a bit more general, as if it's the soul of the universe. So there's this broad width of meanings, and yet common to them was this sense that this Logos is foundational to existence, built into the fundamental nature of everything. So for John to take this Greek concept and reinterpret it through the lens of the person of Jesus was about the most powerful conceptual resource available to John to say how deeply and profoundly fundamental to life and to existence is this Jesus of Nazareth. There's a tradition in English of translating Logos as word and in French as la parole. In the beginning was the word is the usual translation. And that's the translation we heard this morning. And it's a legitimate translation, but it's really too narrow. it doesn't capture kind of the magnificence and depth the sense that Greeks that it carried for the Greeks. So we might better translate these parts of John chapter 1 in this way. In the beginning was the cosmic word and the cosmic rationality and the cosmic wisdom and the cosmic unity, all bound into one, called the Logos. And this Logos, was with God, and in fact, this Logos was God. So that captures a bit more of how Greeks would have heard those opening couple of verses. And many Greeks could go along with what John says there. But then in verse 3, John starts to reshape the Greek understanding of Logos. Because in verse 3, he says, all things came into being through the Logos, and without the Logos, nothing came into being. And now that's different. That's the action of creation through the Logos. The Logos doing the creation. For Greeks, creation is not the role of the Logos. Logos is part of the essence of everything, but it's not the creator of it all. But John is saying, well, those Logos qualities actually belong to the creator. And so that whatever instances of rationality or wisdom or word or truth occur in creation are actually themselves reflections of those qualities in the creator. It's as if identifying the Logos with God, the creator, in verse 3, or let me rephrase that. Then, as if identifying the Logos with God in verse 3 wasn't enough, then in verse 4, and then through the rest of the chapter, John makes the really big move that would be completely alien to Greek thinking. Because then John identifies that Logos with one particular person in time and space, Jesus of Nazareth. Now, this is a dramatically new and radical challenge for Greek thought. In effect, John takes this profoundly vast Greek concept of Logos and boldly redefines it by focusing it on this one person, Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph of Bethlehem. Now, in the early church, the baptism formula arises from Matthew 28. In fact, we see it right there. Baptism takes place in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we are baptized with that phrase universally across Christianity. But because of John, Logos becomes a synonym for the Son, the so-called second person of the Trinity. And so the use of Logos for the Son reminds us that creation, the totality of creation, is an act of God's own rationality, wisdom, and word, and that creation is fundamentally good. Now, I'm going into all this not for the sake of starting the new year by studying Greek. Rather, my focus is on the work of God in creativity and new beginnings and new interpretations. John starts his gospel with something really new, a radically new interpretation of an old word, in order to bring new perspective on the importance of this Logos and on God through this Jesus. So verse 4 goes on to say, in him, in the Logos as Jesus, was life. And the life of Jesus, this Logos, is the light of humanity. So as we begin a new year and under a return to tight COVID restrictions, I'm beginning with the life and light of the world. Excuse me. How Emmanuel, God with us in Jesus, leads us to life and light and new understandings and new ways of interpreting and new creation, even in the midst of all the challenge. As we begin this year, I want us to pray, Lord, in the context of this ongoing COVID, we ask that your life and light move us into newness and new creativity and new perspectives and new mission. So I'm going to give a very simple example of this. I've been thinking about how we do mission in these ongoing COVID conditions. We don't stop doing mission. We don't stop blessing people in the name of Jesus just because of COVID. So earlier this week, I was talking about this to Leanne, and she told me about this practice that her family does. And so I'm going to ask Leanne to jump in now and tell us about this.
Hi. So for context, until recently, the past 3 years when we moved to Montreal, we have moved around a lot. And as a result of that, it has been very difficult to establish community. So we decided early on that we were going to intentionally create relationships with our neighbors by inviting them in for coffee or whatever was culturally appropriate wherever we were living. And we did that for years. And when we moved here, we did that as well. And all of the neighbors, normally it depends how we live. When we lived in a townhome, then I would invite everyone sort of in our little row. When we lived in an apartment, I would invite everyone. In Germany, it was 3 floors worth, so just 3 households. Obviously, you have to do something that makes sense for you. In recent times, because of COVID, now we can't do that. So when we first moved here, we invited everyone in whose property touched ours. And now we can't do that. So what we started doing was we started just, the children would make little cards. And then we would put them in everybody's mailboxes, say, you know, here's our contact information. If you need anything, let us know. So last year we made Valentine's. So we just made like a Valentine card, said, we're thinking of you, let us know if you need anything. And then the kids and I made some cookies. And we did something similar on Easter. And then we typically do something in the fall as well. And the feedback we got during the shutdown from that was really, really positive. And as a result, we're kind of stuck now. Now we have to do it because it's expected, but it's a really good thing, because it means when we're walking, we see neighbors on their porches. If they see us, they might come out and say hello. And especially Mike, because of his field, has had an opportunity to talk with some people and comfort them if they have worries. So it's been a really, really great way to be God's hands and feet in our neighborhood in a really simple way. We haven't at all ever said to anyone, Jesus loves you. We've just been very practical. And then if people have any questions or concerns, our hope is that that will eventually lead to more profound conversations.
Great. Thank you, Leanne, for telling us about that. I think that's a really neat, great idea. And doesn't need to be restricted to Valentine's Day or Easter. It can be a great way to connect with neighbors and give them encouragement at any time. Although, of course, you know, Valentine's or Easter is a great time to do it too. So I'm actually committing myself to do this, to bake cookies for at least half a dozen of our neighbors by the end of this month. And my family knows that I'm not a baker. I've just started doing a little baking recently. And so I'm hoping this actually has a positive effect, not a negative effect on our neighbors with my baking. But nonetheless, I was inspired by Leanne's story when I was chatting with her earlier this week about their family story, about them doing this. And so it's a simple way of reaching out and encouraging our neighbors. And so I'm going to be doing this within the next few weeks, and doing something new for not only for our neighborhood, but for me as well, in terms of reaching out and connecting. So this sense of being light and life to our neighbors in big ways or small ways is something I've also been reading about in an interesting book called My Vertical Neighborhood: How Strangers Became a Community by Linda McGibbon. It's published by University Press. Linda McGibbon moved from Moncton, New Brunswick to a condo in downtown Toronto. That is quite a change. And the book tells the story of how she sought to reach out to bless her neighbors in her condo building. And so that's where the title of the book comes, My Vertical Neighborhood. In Moncton, she had a horizontal neighborhood in terms of her home on a street. She moves to Toronto into a vertical neighborhood of her apartment building, condo building. And so she tells this creative story of several years of her building relationships and blessing her neighbors in her condo building in Toronto. So these are kind of inspiring examples for us as we begin a new year. to finding ways to bless our neighbors. So remarkably, we are still in Christmas season. May seem a little strange because, our secular Christmas culture ended on Christmas Day, but with all the Christmas hype gone, it's easy to forget that in the Christian calendar, January 5th is actually the last day of Christmas. So we are called to be Christmas people who bring the life and light of Christ, the Logos, Christ, the wisdom, the word, the rationality, and the creativity behind all creation into the lives of our loved ones, into the lives of others around us. COVID is very discouraging. But as Christmas people, we're not overcome by the discouragement. We recognize it, we acknowledge it, we take care of ourselves in the midst of it. As I said to Fiona one day last week, I was feeling the COVID blues last week. But we're not overcome by it. And we begin this new year knowing that we are people, as Christmas people, we are people who live in the trust and hope and light and life of Jesus in the midst of it all. So that's what I want to say this morning. And now we will open our mics for any comments or discussion or thoughts that anyone may have out there in Zoom land this morning. Any thoughts in response as we start?
I would just like to ask Leanne a question. In the process of communicating with all these people around her and Mike, is there a chance to discuss religion or faith, or where does that fit into the picture?
So normally what has happened in the past, and again, I'll speak specifically to in-person things, which are a little more difficult with COVID. If we have people over for coffee or cake or a meal, then we will pray before the meal. And Mike normally does that. And so what he does, do you want to say what you? He says, in our home, it's our custom to thank God before we eat, and then he'll pray. But beyond that, we don't really, we're not very overt. So we will talk, it will come up in conversation, we have a Bible study we attend, or we're not free on Sundays because we have church, and we kind of leave it there. Our experience has been that typically people will come to us if they have spiritual questions, or if they're stuck spiritually, but that doesn't happen very often. So more what we get is people saying, that's really wonderful. It's very kind. It's very thoughtful. And we choose to leave it at that and wait for other people to approach us with spiritual questions. So we don't hide the reason for our joy, but we're also not very overt about it. I mean, we do have, I don't know if you can see it, we do have a cross right behind Mike's head on our window. It's like a fake stained glass thing he made out of tissue paper. So, I mean, anybody walking by our house would see that. But other than that, no, it's not very overt.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can. Yes,
Okay,
Allison,
great.
go ahead.
Thank you. As a recipient of one of the cards or several of the cards, I'm not really looking for like anything that I need anybody to say to me, but the reach out is like profound. You feel it's Allison speaking, and so I to me, like, and I got little pictures of the children and that, and I said, oh well, see these they're connecting with me, and I feel connected, and that was like a good thing. I wasn't feeling like lost or anything at the time, but when I received it, it was wonderful. It was like we were in church and they were saying, "Hi, how you doing today?" So it was great.
That's great.
I don't know if that answers something. Yeah.
Thank you, Allison. Just for
No problem.
those who may not recall, actually, Di, are you out? Where are you there, Di? I'm wondering if you can just give people the background to the cards that Allison's talking about.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Allison. I think that what she's referring to maybe recently and then in the past A lot of Kids Connect families have chosen different families to write cards to, or maybe draw things, personalize things with even pictures, and send it out to different people in the church just to encourage them and let them know that we still see you and we still care for you. So, so I think that's a feedback from that.
Yeah,
Right.
because I said to Jean, I said, I don't know this person, and I don't know that person. I don't know. And then when I saw the pictures, oh, I know them. They sit in front of me at church. so it was wonderful.
That's great. Thank you so much, Allison, for that. That's just, that's really encouraging to us. So thank you.
Okay. All right.
Any other thoughts or comments as we start the new year with these words this morning from John's Gospel?
Just one more question, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because this iPad is not that great on volume. I was just wondering what happened with the Christmas meals that Fiona organized. Whether you had any response from that. And
Christine. So we had in our minds to make 20 meals, and we had requests for 18 meals, and they were all members of the congregation who wrote and asked for meals for people in their neighborhood or situation who they knew, or in their workplace. And Arifa, maybe if you want to say something later about your situation, but she and other people had people that they either worked with or lived near who were going through difficult times. One family asked for meals for a family whose family member had died, and so they were in mourning, and then the whole family of 7 got COVID. And
oh no.
So the response was just like, thank you so much for caring for us. So it was very interesting. There weren't a lot of requests. I think there were 4 requests for those 18 meals. And then the day of, when we had leftovers, some people took the leftovers to just give extra food.
Okay, but I'm sure it was appreciated.
Arifa, did you want to say anything? Because you got meals for work colleagues, I think.
Yes, actually I met them just after I start working. So they were a brother and sister from Cameroon, I guess. And after that, they were on vacation. But when I gave them the food, they got really happy, and it was a good feeling. I liked it. And thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing that.
It was
Arifa and Fiona. Yeah.
It's so important that like Arifa met these people that we would never have met, right? And so because she was paying attention to their need, she connected the dots. That was really,
yes, but I'm sure they need it. I'm sure they need it because they were living here alone. They were, yeah, like I said, brother and sister living alone here. And yeah, they got really happy. I'm sure they didn't have anything to eat for Christmas.
Right.
Thank you, Christine, for asking that question. That's really helpful. Thank you. So I think we'll now move to a time of prayer. So over to you, Fiona.